We'll get started soon, so we're just letting folks log on, and then we'll jump to it. Thanks for being here. Welcome new people that joined. We're going to give it another minute, and then we'll jump into it. Thanks for being here. All right. Welcome. Great to see everyone. Glad so many people could join. My name is Stuart Gardner from Gen180, and welcome to YouTube, Shaping What Americans Believe About Clean Energy. We have an amazing group of panelists today. We have an amazing co-host from Climate Advocacy Lab today. So really excited to jump into this important discussion. Let me introduce our panelists. First is Melanie Moon from Spitfire Strategies. As a vice president based in Washington, D.C., Mel works hand in hand with Spitfire's clients to build lasting communications capacity, helping progressive organizations mobilize and move their audiences to act and achieve success. Mel, thanks for being here. We have Sebastian Hamarani from Rising Tide Interactive. He's a senior director of media at Rising Tide. He just returned to RTI after serving as the deputy paid digital director for the Harris Walsh campaign in 2024, helping lead the campaign's 9-figure paid media program, including its approach to YouTube. And also, Sebastian, welcome. And also Steph O'Connell from Google. Stephanie leads Google and YouTube's advertising partnerships for U.S. elections and advocacy team, specifically supporting progressive organizations and campaigns. And of course, our other esteemed host, Raz Pollux from Climate Advocacy Lab. I got to practice that one. Really great. So happy you guys are here. YouTube is shaping what Americans believe about energy, climate, and pretty much everything else. Yet many climate and clean energy advocates are underutilizing it as a core communications tool. So from cracking YouTube algorithm to building trust, shaping narratives, and reaching the right people at the right time, today we're going to discuss practical insights into how to use YouTube, not just to share content, but to shape culture and drive clean energy action. Thanks for being here, everybody. Like I said, I'm Stuart Gardner from Gen180. We're a nonprofit organization that is reframing the energy narrative. We work with trusted messengers to tell clean energy success stories, working with storytelling and cultural communications, helping schools electrify to save money, and helping homes and communities electrify to save money as well. So really, really happy everyone's here today. And I'll pass it to our other co-host, Raz, to tell you a little bit about Climate Advocacy Lab.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and thanks for having me today. So Climate Advocacy Lab exists to support climate and clean energy advocates. We have over 5,000 members, mostly in the US, but also around the world. And we provide training opportunities from one-off trainings to long-term cohort trainings. We work with academics and with advocates on furthering research into effective climate advocacy strategies, and we also provide community and networking opportunities for advocates. So if that all sounds good and you're not already a member, you can join by going to climateadvocacylab.org. We would love to have you.
All right. So we know who each other are now. Let's start with the first question. Can you help us understand, and this is for everyone, what's the current lay of the land, the current ecosystem around communications, and what role does YouTube play there? Give us a sense of what's going on and where are people getting their information. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to jump in, Stuart. I'll say it's a great question. I think it's no surprise that we're in a pretty pivotal moment right now as communicators. The world is rapidly changing. Information is coming at us in all directions. Trust in institutions is at an all-time low, and we're up against rampant disinformation on all of the platforms that we're trying to engage and reach our audiences on. So, I think as communicators within the philanthropic space, we need more than ever to get our message out there and to be really clear about what our message is in front of all of those audiences that we're trying to engage. And so what we're seeing as well is for YouTube especially, this kind of platform can cut through a lot of this noise and provide that sense of clarity that we really need. And we'll dig into this, I'm sure, later, but YouTube has a really unique storytelling capability to help nonprofits really bring their story to the table. And so it provides a real value add to the field despite this uncertain moment we're in.
Stuart, I can
Sebastian, Steph, yeah.
jump in on this one as well. But when I look at the communications landscape today, the word that really comes to mind for me is choice. People have a lot of choice over what content they want to consume and who they want to consume that content from. That comes with the challenge of, any of us as communicators, we have to make our content engaging, stand out, and earn people's attention. But it also comes with opportunities. As Mel mentioned, YouTube is a hub for people to come and get content of all kinds. And we can really leverage the platform's tools to build communities and drive action offline. And excited for our conversation all about that today.
I love both of those things. I think one thing that I would also just like double tap on is I think one of the things about YouTube that we all should be thinking about as marketers, as content creators, is when it comes to that choice, just the myriad of ways that people consume content on YouTube. So people are deciding to watch, long form videos, or you can tell a bit more of a story on a connected TV, or they're scrolling through a feed on YouTube Shorts, or they're listening to a podcast, which is something I feel like we're all talking about these days. Those are all types of behaviors that happen on YouTube. And so, sort of no matter what kind of content you're creating or the way that you want to tell your story or engage with your audience, YouTube is a piece of that. And so it makes it, I think, that's partially what drives the reach of the platform is whatever you want, you can find it on YouTube, but also sort of whatever you're building, YouTube should be a piece of it.
And Steph, that's a great segue to the next question, which is, especially since there are so many different kinds of content on YouTube, what are some essential elements of a successful YouTube campaign? And along with that, specifically, if you all have an example of a successful clean energy or a successful YouTube campaign that clean energy advocates can use to benchmark.
I'm happy to start since I went last on this. When we think about success on YouTube, the way what we say to content creators and marketers is always to think about thinking like a creator first. And at YouTube, that sort of means four things. One is a bit of what Sebastian's talked about, which is understanding why users come to YouTube, which is ultimately sort of that access and control and choice. So knowing that to be successful on YouTube, you are competing against all the other choice that people have, and thinking about that first when you're creating your content. The other things that we see or we talk about when we say thinking like a creator are YouTube is, yes, a video platform first and foremost, but it's owned by Google, and I am like required to say it is also the second largest search engine. And so when it comes to choice and how people consume, thinking about that search element and thinking about that portion of the sort of interaction, when we talk about the YouTube algorithm, like part of it and significantly is a search algorithm. It's not just a feed-based one like a lot of other social platforms. And so when you're thinking about your content and your campaigns, that should be a part of how you're considering creating content. Another piece is the multi-format aspect that I mentioned. So short form, long form, clips, all of that can live on YouTube. And then the last thing I think that's really important is to be successful on YouTube and to be a successful content creator on the platform. We talk a lot about consistency over virality. Like we love to think about like, what's that like one moment that we can hop on, or what's that one thing that we can, beat the algorithm with or go viral. Like everyone has, I probably on this call has gotten that brief. How do we make our stuff go viral? But actually to be successful on YouTube, the real important thing is to be consistent. And so thinking about like what that means and sort of building your, movement from there. But yeah, I'll let Melanie and Sebastian hop in on thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'll say plus one to everything that Steph just said. In addition to consistency for a successful YouTube campaign, I think we're also seeing the need for true and real authenticity on the platform. Videos, and we'll get into this a little bit when we talk about, content creators, but the videos that are getting the most views, the most likes, the most interaction are those that have a really human-centered storytelling element to them that's real. People can see themselves within the video. And I'll say too, on that point, one campaign that I actually think is a great example of that, and I like to point to is from Climate Power. So that was launched back in 2020. I'm sure many of you know it was a project of the League of Conservation Voters, Sierra Club, and CAP, and it played a real important role in getting support for the Inflation Reduction Act. And the interesting thing about that campaign was that they featured regular folks in the videos. So it wasn't really about, talking about climate in terms of sacrifice or an upcoming catastrophe, but it was reframing clean energy around jobs, lower utility bills, things that really normal people could relate to. And it was also a good mix of short form, long form, and content creator. Something to think about if we're trying to name a couple of really successful campaigns in the space.
Definitely agree with everything Melanie and Steph shared. Um, One thing I would add on top of that is, success is going to look a little bit different depending on where your organization is starting from and what your end goal is. If you are new to the YouTube ecosystem, you probably need to start with just building awareness of your brand and building up kind of a follower base on the platform. And then from there, it gets easier to do things like direct people to, other web actions or offline action. Um, and really build that, pipeline from viewer to engaged supporter. Um, and then would also add that like we have a lot of creative freedom with what we can run on YouTube. Um, One of my favorite campaigns that I've gotten to work with is an organization that wanted to promote heat pump adoption. So heat pumps like maybe on the face of it like don't feel too exciting to folks when they're first encountering it. But they came up with some really great creative executions about like people on a game show winning a heat pump and getting really excited about that. That were interesting, hooked attention, and really helped them drive success.
Love that. Thanks, guys.
Before we move on, sorry,
Yeah.
there's one other thing I just want to sort of mention, and Melanie talked a little bit about this in her answer around creators. I think there's both like building your presence on YouTube and thinking like a creator, but I think one of the other ways you can be really successful is by sort of hopping on the rocket ship that another creator has already built. You don't have to like necessarily start from square one, and I think those are some of the campaigns that like I think of a lot. This is something I don't know if people are familiar with Cleo Abram, but she's a big YouTuber. She's someone who talks a lot about optimistic science. So it's like actually great for this audience in particular. And she talks a lot about like how she partners with brands, nations, and causes because she recognizes how difficult it is to build your presence. It's also something like if you're looking for inspiration outside of the climate space, like St. Jude Children's Hospital has done some really successful campaigns in partnering with creators. They did one last year with Ryan Trahan, who like had a challenge to travel 50 states in 50 days. But I think that's just another way to think about this is like partially like what is your own sort of, what's the rocket ship on YouTube that you are building, but also who else can we like partner with when thinking about like what a YouTube campaign looks like.
I love that idea. Yeah, partnering yeah, makes you stronger there. That's great. Um, Steph, you mentioned the word algorithm. Um, and this may be a complicated question or an easy question, but how does the YouTube algorithm shape what people actually see? And what role do paid ads play? Does that make a difference? And this is open to anyone, but yeah, what's the deal with the algorithm and how important are paid ads versus just hoping the world sees it? Anyone can take this.
I can jump in first. So, I think when it comes to the algorithm, I'm sure Steph can speak to that with much more specificity than I can. But ultimately, any social platform, and YouTube is in part a social platform, the algorithm is meant to show you things that, based on your behavior, the platform thinks you're going to find interesting. And I think that ties into two things, which is one, on the organic side, having that consistent presence that we've talked about. So there is content that can be surfaced that's engaging to folks, and that, is going to have a presence in their feed. And I think second, when it comes to the paid ads part of this question, which I can, talk all day about, um, I think one of the points I always want to impress on folks, it's not paid or versus organic, it's paid and organic. Simply because, if you want to show up in somebody's feed, you can do that organically, but you can do it a lot faster with paid investment where you're targeting folks, getting those paid ad placements. And, as they engage, that will be a signal that gets more content, into their organic feed. Um, and we'll just keep your audience growing, and like that universe of people who know who you are and want to engage with your content growing. And I think, if we look stepping outside of our space, like there's a reason that big brands are always advertising, even if you already know who they are. Or if we look at maybe groups who are on the other side of this conversation, who spend a lot of money very consistently surfacing their content on YouTube, because they know that to have that reach, it really is a paid and organic strategy together.
Thanks for that. Mel, Steph, ideas about the algorithm and paid versus organic there?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I think about, again, sort of goes back to the idea that YouTube is also a search engine. And so when thinking about the algorithm, it is a little bit different. I mean, there is YouTube Shorts in your Shorts feed, but in your, Discover feed and sort of when you go to YouTube, and just seeing what pops up. But so much of how people actually like come look or like interact with YouTube is they're coming and looking for something specific and they're searching for it. And so when thinking about like your presence and campaigns and videos, I think of it like, some of it is truly like good old SEO, just from a video aspect. Um, I think for feed-based things, one of the things I'm really obsessed with right now is this idea that everyone's feed is just so different, and like completely agree with Sebastian about like the importance of both paid and organic, but organic reach is just really hard to get. And I think that's ultimately what you get from a paid program is like reach that you'll just never be able to like crack from an organic standpoint, because everyone's content is so different and there's so many people creating content. I heard someone say something recently that like their their like tagline was like monoculture still exists. It just exists as ads, which is like maybe a little sad, but I think is like something to keep in mind when thinking about like what are the goals of whatever program I'm trying to build, and like what would a paid component look like.
Yeah, plus one to all of this, just to add a little bit more color to the organic piece, because at Spitfire we work with a lot of nonprofits that at times have the budget to add in this paid ad component to their work, and a lot of times they don't, and they still at the same time need to really refine their brand, their strategy. They want all of their content to still be aligned with what they care about. So that when audiences do go to explore who they are, that all of that is still really aligned. So, one thing that we recommend on the organic side is that nonprofits really try and organize their content into three specific pillars. So, you have one pillar, which is all about inspiring your audiences. So, that's thought leadership, spotlight content. Two is equip. So, this is all of your resources, your tools, your educational pieces, blog posts, and then three, which is commit and or champion. So these are opportunities that you're presenting to your audience to take action through donating, signing petitions, that kind of thing. It can help nonprofits ensure, even if they don't have the money to get into this paid space, that their content is still diverse and that they're integrating YouTube into their overarching digital strategy. So a few things to think about.
Mel, I love that three pillar structure. I feel like that could be really helpful for a lot of orgs. So it's great. So I think one of the things that a lot of advocates are facing right now is a lot of skepticism of all sorts of sources, and then also, especially when you're trying to reach politically mixed audiences. And so my next question is how advocates can design YouTube content that builds trust and credibility with these mixed or skeptical audiences. And then, sort of related to that, how can we address disinformation and misinformation on YouTube and sort of inoculate against it? Whoever wants to go first.
Easy question.
Yeah, not like the question of our age or anything like that.
I know I just spoke, but I can jump in here specifically around the combating disinformation piece. I mean, we're dealing with this a lot as communicators, trying to understand how and when to address it, if it's worth the time and effort, because it's rampant, it's everywhere. So there's a few things that we recommend that groups can do, especially on digital platforms like YouTube. You can have a couple of different tactical approaches to addressing it. One is if you're seeing disinformation pop up on videos that you're posting, you can actually label that as disinformation on the platform. You can also conduct in-channel balance messaging. So if you're seeing disinformation pop up in comments or commentary, you can then interject, and we have some specific tactics on how to do that effectively. And then we also have inoculation messaging as a tactic. So this is a way to prime your audiences so that they understand that they are at risk of seeing disinformation. So you name the falsehood and you debunk it while also stating who is really perpetrating the falsehood. So you're naming that nefarious actor within the messaging itself. All of these things are possible. And a lot of times, though, organizations will assess the risk and assess what they're seeing and choose not to do anything either. And that also works. So, it truly is an internal strategy about what you want to focus on, but there are tactics out there that you can try and deploy.
I think one thing I think about in this space is this is a really good opportunity or time to really think about the power of partnering with creators. We have like some recent stats out about how Gen Z and millennials in particular trust YouTube creators more than like any other celebrities or public figures, for better or for worse. But who is out there who already has like built that trust with these audiences, like with those sort of politically mixed audiences or folks who are hard to reach, and how can you partner with them as a trusted validator, and get your message out that way.
Definitely agree with everything Steph and Mel shared. Would add, I think it's also important to think about making our messaging not feel like a political ad. And that might be, interesting coming from the paid ads person, but it is, I think surprising to me just how much content still feels like very newsy or very, traditional 30-second broadcast spot when I think a lot of people are just very primed to tune that out. Um, and turning to things like creators, which Steph mentioned, really does offer a way to kind of get past that initial guardrails up barrier of like a lot of people right now don't want to engage with any kind of political content. And we kind of need to like chip down that wall before we can get our message in front of them. And finding creative executions that do that are going to go a long way in that work.
Yeah, thanks, guys. What if, let's say, I'm on this call and uh, I'm on the comms team or I'm a leader of a mission-driven organization. I'm like, okay, I'm convinced. I want to be on. Like, we need to get our message and our organization on YouTube. Um, how often should I be posting? Is it all about consistency, like Steph mentioned, or is it about quantity, quality, volume? Like, what? what's a reasonable suggestion you would make? Is it once a day? What kind of planning should mission-driven organizations think about when investing in YouTube? Just about how often, um, things like that.
Steph may have a really concrete answer to this, but from a communicator's perspective, we always say that YouTube is essentially your hub. If you choose to leverage YouTube as a primary platform. So think of it like your website. It's the hub of where all of your content can live. So it's like a library that you can build. It can include evergreen content. So it's not something that you need to worry about having old content on, because if you use the platform as a library, people are going to be wanting to come and see some of that older content from you. And we also recommend too, I mean, nonprofits, smaller organizations don't often have the time and resource to continue to push videos out there. So if they do have the time and resource to have maybe 3 videos produced throughout the year, you can cut those and divide them up and put them across different platforms, but they can still live on YouTube. So it's another way to leverage your resources and still get in front of your audiences.
When thinking about like creating content for a YouTube channel, we have sort of this, we also have like a 3-part framework that is what we call like hero content, hub content, and help content. It sounds very similar to a lot of things Mel has said. So like really double tapping on that. Um, Hero content is stuff that is maybe more highly produced. It's when you're partnering with a creator. It's a big live stream event that you're doing. Don't think of that as being something that you have to do all the time, but like still should exist on your channel if and when you create it. Hub content is more of the like sort of consistent content that we think is what's really important to like actually building a following on YouTube. And there's no like specific you have to post every day. I would say you probably want to post at least once a week, maybe a couple of times a week. But that content, again, can be clips from some of those longer things. It can be content that you're repurposing from other places. But the important thing here is whatever you're doing is to be consistent with it. So if you start out posting once a day, you kind of then you've put your you've put yourself in that box and you're going to post every day. If you start once a week, just something that you can realistically keep up. And then we also talk about help content, which I think is also a lot of that other repository stuff. Things don't necessarily show up like in as like primary on your YouTube channel or page, but it's stuff that you want to live, like Melanie was saying, as sort of a library of content that you have that people can search for and look for. This is, I think, actually really important for this space because this is the type of content where you can really be like the authoritative answer to someone's question, but isn't necessarily what's going to get people to like initially discover you or want to follow you. And then the last piece is shorts, which is like the vertical video format on YouTube. And my recommendation here is like if you're creating content for Reels or for TikTok or for other platforms, like you should also put it on shorts. And it's a way to like repurpose stuff that you're already doing. But if you don't have a vertical video like creation arm, or that's not something you've already invested in, it's not something you necessarily have to start with or do. So think of it as like an add-on. From my perspective, if you're already doing it, or once you already have sort of like something built, but it's not necessarily something we recommend people like have to start with.
On the paid ad side, I think kind of a roadblock we run into sometime with our programs and our clients is oftentimes when we talk about running a paid ad, people say like, okay, I have to spend however much building this like highly produced spot. Or maybe they do have one of those spots that they've invested in and they, are like, well, this is our paid ad and like use it over and over for a lot of things. And the fact is like ads start to lose efficacy after a while if you keep using them over and over. They kind of burn out. Um, and this is kind of where like the power of YouTube as a very, unique ecosystem comes in, which is you can do things like take a really good, 15, 30-second, however long clip from just an organic video and run that as a paid spot. And it'll be just as effective on the platform as something that you actually went into the studio to make and film. So, I think as you kind of update your organic content, that really does lend itself to keeping what you might be doing on the paid side fresh as well.
Steph, I have a follow-up question for you about shorts, which is that a lot of the orgs that I talk to are producing vertical videos for like Instagram or TikTok, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to do like the more sort of long-form YouTube videos. Would you recommend that orgs just start posting those vertical videos as shorts?
Yeah, I would say like, yeah, totally. If you have that content, my recommendation is like put it on YouTube as shorts. Like it can live there too. You don't have to like have long form videos, or you can at least start that way. Um, that's definitely something that like we're seeing. Like it used to be that big creators on YouTube, were all folks who then have, who then pivoted into shorts, but we're seeing that more and more of folks who even have established presences are mostly creating shorts content at this point, partially because they can take it to other
Yeah.
platforms easier. So I think cross posting, sort of regardless of what your existing YouTube presence is something I would recommend if you are already creating those vertical assets.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of repurposing content across platforms, especially with like, most orgs have really small digital and comms teams. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this is like such a YouTube stat, but like 45% of people who use YouTube Shorts aren't on TikTok, and like 60% of people who use YouTube Shorts aren't on Reels. And so like, the choice piece that Sebastian started us off with of this whole ecosystem is so real in that like people are choosing, even just what platforms to be on. And, those Venn diagrams aren't circles, so you're not just creating extra work for yourself, you're really reaching new people by putting it elsewhere.
Cool. And now I have a question that's on the other end of the spectrum, which is what type of content, especially clean energy content, consistently earn longer watch times? And I'll also say just in general, like engagement as well.
Raz, you have us stumped. No, I'm kidding. Um, I think it goes back to, and not just clean energy in general, I think it goes back to some of the things we were speaking earlier about, what makes a high quality YouTube campaign, what makes a successful campaign work. And those videos are authentic, they're human-centered. You don't need to have the most expensive, high-tech equipment to create, a really successful video, as long as you know the tools that you can use to actually create one later on. I mean, Canva, DaVinci, these are all free software programs that can help videos really shine. Um, and so, just pointing to a couple of things there, but it all goes back to authenticity and consistency when it comes to a successful YouTube campaign.
I think, and this is like easier said than done, I very much recognize, but the other thing that I have seen with folks is like really the key to this is just a lot of testing and experimentation. And then when you find something that works for your organization or your brand, really leaning into it. And so like not necessarily someone in the climate space, but other folks sort of with, non in the nonprofit space that I've seen, like had done a lot of videos that were about like current news topics, thinking like, oh, this is what people is front of mind for people, and would see like those videos just like weren't getting a lot of reach, like weren't performing well. But then like would do something like totally different, and just have it be about the same thing, but just a different format and more of like a Q&A versus like a direct to camera thing. And that worked really well. And so all of that's just to say, like, again, easier said than done than for me to say, like, create a bunch of stuff and see what works. But I think it's hard to like replicate see what someone else is doing and replicate it. So much of it is like what is going to ultimately like be authentic for you all.
Yeah. Um, I think as it relates to this question, like, you know, as Steph has said, like it's hard to, you know, put out a long form content video and kind of expect that to get a lot of like views, attention just right away. And I think this is where, a paid program that's building awareness, that's surfacing highlights from, your organic content, is going to help in just building and curating an audience who want to tune in for longer form content. I think second, with long form content, like there are some creative executions that lend themselves to success. A lot of long form content on YouTube is in like a podcast style that people can like listen to. They're not, you know, having to keep their eyes on the screen, but they are listening, they're engaged. Um, or, things that might be kind of more of like a how-to, be it like people playing video games together or like cooking, things that, kind of keep people engaged over kind of a long watch session.
Thanks, guys. Um, we got some good questions coming in from the Q&A, so folks, feel free to put questions in there if you have questions. Here's kind of integrate a question into one of the questions I had. You know, we alluded to this a little bit at the beginning about the creators really being trusted messengers and how certain age groups, the way they trust the creators more so than other generations would trust the nightly news or a government office, things like that. Can you tell us about like the relationship or any additional ideas around the creators really being these trusted people, even though if you don't know them? And that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. And then also, are there any nonprofit organizations that you guys know that are making really great content, not with a creator, but just organically on their own? Those are maybe related, but an organization as a trusted messenger as opposed to a creator. I just threw a lot at you, but you guys got it.
I'll speak a little bit to the trust piece with content creators. I think, what we've really seen, and this has grown tremendously in the last year and a half, is that, micro influencers, so influencers that you're likely to see as you're going through your feed, are actually more likely to inspire action than celebrities or high name recognition influencers, especially those with really, really high follower counts. And so that's something from, a social impact communicator perspective, we're really monitoring. Because again, the reason why those micro influencers are so effective is because they're real. So they're promoting a sense of realness in their content. So you're seeing everyday routines, emotional challenges, things that people can relate to. And because we're in such a polarized, tumultuous environment, people are really gravitating towards that kind of content because they can lean into this sense of familiarity, especially for those who are feeling really powerless in the moment. A content creator that's providing a sense of comfort is really welcome on these types of platforms. Commercial industries have been leveraging this for far longer than the nonprofit sector, and we are really behind. So it's really important for us that we're in this moment trying to catch up and keep pace because we can leverage the power that these micro influencers and content creators have in order to achieve the impact that we really want within the social justice field. And they have the power to break through traditional media ecosystems, which is pretty wild. And a lot of that is because of the lack of trust that individuals have now in the media ecosystem at large. So, I can't say enough that the content creator piece is huge, and it's something that, groups should really be considering when trying to establish a digital strategy.
I can jump in and add, I think the creator space is still being defined somewhat. And that comes with, some challenges, but it also comes with some opportunities around building, unique relationships with creators, leveraging their content, across multiple platforms, leveraging some of that content in, paid programming. Second, I think if you are kind of building up, a program, sometimes you don't need to go to a creator directly. You can do what I call like a creator style content. So maybe it's a staff member who's doing that, kind of like 9 by 16 vertical video, doing an explainer or something, along those lines that feels very natural and authentic to the feed, but kind of doesn't, involve that additional step of building a partnership with a creator if you're not there yet.
Thanks, Scott.
Hmm. We've gotten a few really good questions in the Q&A box. Feel free to keep putting those in there. Got a really few really good ones about paid content on YouTube. So one is, could you recommend any resources for learning about how to pay to promote content on YouTube? Every time we do it, I'm never certain that we're doing it right slash optimally. Would love to learn more. And then somebody else said, budget size is going to, depend on the targeted audience, et cetera. And with YouTube ads, what's the minimum budget to be worth setting up an ads account?
I think I can get us started here. So I think first of all, the resources that Google has published around Google Ads as a platform are actually very robust and very helpful. I've been working with Google Ads as a platform for 8 years, and I still will take a look at those, and they are accessible and helpful. So definitely recommend using that resource. And I do think this is where you know working with some outside, assistants, be it a consultant, a freelancer, somebody who just is familiar with the platform, is helpful. I also think, just taking a step back, any like it's very easy to turn on a paid ads campaign. It is a lot harder to make sure that like it's aligning with what your goals are. So, before anything goes live or you set up a budget, like really think about like what do I want out of these dollars? And like what is success going to be defined as? And then, I think the final piece there is like what budget is worth spending. I think the great thing about YouTube is like it is a really efficient place to advertise. And you know, you'll want to align whatever budget you have with kind of like how many people you want to talk to or what kind of results you want. But like, I think done right, even like a $200 to $300, one-time spend could get you some results. I think if you are building like a more enduring, ongoing program, you probably want to set aside, it's going to be different, but like something anywhere in like the 5 to 10K range monthly, if you want to build like kind of a robust program that is really, staying in front of people and driving results, over a long-term basis. Definitely curious for other perspectives here on these too.
I would just plus one to everything Sebastian said. I think that, as with any campaign that you're running, but especially on the paid side, like before you start spending those dollars, be really clear on like what are you trying to do here? And is it just reach more people? Is it, drive some sort of action? And have a plan to measure based off of that. I will say running, paying for and promoting content on YouTube is more complicated than I would like it to be. It's, I don't know, I guess it's partially why I have the job that I have and work with folks across the space on how to run these programs is it's not as straightforward as I wish it were. And there are a million different formats you can run and types of ads. So I think working with folks who have done this in the past is like often a great place at least to get started, and then sort of build capacity to be able to run, on your own. But I would say it's not uncommon, or the question of I'm not sure that I've done this right, or however it was phrased, like is a very common one. And so like you should, not worry that like this isn't, something that everyone in the space is kind of dealing with.
Thanks, guys. Getting some great Q&A in here. I like this one. Should nonprofits be shifting their staffing resources to hire staff with more experience in doing creative work? Should nonprofits and mission-driven organizations be hiring the talent internally? I'll give a shout out to Gen180 that has a comedian in residence on our team, and part of that strategy was exactly what this person was suggesting, like, how do you in-house some of the magic? Does that make sense? Or, really is there enough talent out there to partner? What are you guys' thoughts on insourcing that talent magic?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think it is a great idea to consider different ways to infuse creativity into your communications. We've seen a lot of nonprofits, just like Gen 180, look into ways to doing this. Uh, you know, we are embarking on this new phase of communicating in this world where we have to really explore these avenues for bringing in cultural strategies and creative strategies in a different way, because the way that our minds are really viewing and interpreting content is changing. So we are recommending that our nonprofits consider this in their staffing, in the way that they build out their campaign work, their communication plans. All of that is intertwined and integrated. We're seeing this from integrating creativity from the arts, from pop culture to comedy, because all of that is going to help build up the messaging that you're going to want to put out into the world that's going to engage those audiences in a really authentic way.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, there's someone I work with who sort of uses this phrase all the time that I love, which is like, think of creators as your creatives. And some of that is, partnering with someone who has, who is a creator, that's like what they do full time, and using them, sourcing them for content. But I also do think some of it is rethinking what are the skills that we are hiring for. Like a comms professional used to be someone who like knew how to write a press release, but like comms now is also just like knowing how to build content, for your social channels. And that might be somebody whose background is totally different or has never taken a professional like comms class, but like, has a, built a really great following at their university or whatnot, or vice versa, like on the creative side is someone who, that's their background as opposed to like answering a creative brief. So I think really thinking, about like what kind of skills and background, or, are we looking for in all of these roles is really important. And someone who like has been able to build a following online and knows how to use these tools is like first and foremost.
Agreeing with everything Val and Steph shared. I also think we're in a place where anybody can be a creator or a creative. So thinking about when it comes to existing teams, like what resources they can plug into to help with content production, communication production. Um, and then just to kind of throw out there, I think we're in a place for like traditional comms, digital content creation, like is as Steph was indicating, like that's all one thing now. It should not be siloed. It really needs to be all housed together.
Thanks. Raz, you want the next one or should I take it?
I will take it. We got a great question about the most effective way to collaborate with creators besides just giving them talking points about a particular problem, bill slash opportunity, especially those, micro creators. What's a creative approach to making it not sound like it's placement or commercial, but something that's part of their flow organically?
I mean, this kind of goes back to the basics, but the messaging development piece is really core to working with these content creators, because they're going to be speaking essentially from your organizational voice and using their followers in order to get your voice in front of this larger audience. So Yes, talking points are kind of the first step, but having the content creator be involved in the development of all of that messaging so they fully understand the strategy behind what you're putting out there and why and who the audiences are. It's not as fancy and creative, but the strategy piece is the most important when trying to work with some of these creators. And some of them have already done work on the social justice side, so they're used to, having to potentially adjust some of the way that they're communicating, how they are showing up within the video itself. But some aren't. So having that strategy time built in at the front is really vital.
I would say, rising tide, we are also always advising, our partners to let the creator bring their authenticity and their brand to the message that you want them to share. Don't, you know, Obviously you want to kind of lay out guidelines about what you want to communicate, but don't get to a place where like you're being prescriptive, or kind of directing a creator as you would like another kind of content. Let them bring their own style to the execution.
I think the last thing I would say, and this is very much easier said than done, is also thinking about building just like longer term partnerships and relationships with creators and not just thinking about, one-off campaigns, which is partially what allows them to, really speak more authentically and with their own voice. And also like candidly, just like get as engaged with sort of your message and your cause. As possible, as opposed to thinking about this as just like, a small engagement. So where there's that opportunity to like really invest and build a relationship for the long term, I think that's where we see the most impact and actually, have these campaigns perform as well as possible.
Here's a question from the Q&A, kind of a more technical question, might be simple to answer. If an organization partners with a creator and they make content, is that posted on the creator's channel or on the organization's channel or both? How does that appear to the world?
I would say you should post it in both places. Like you want the benefit of the creator's channel because they're going to have most likely much larger reach than you, but you also want the benefit of this asset continuing to exist within your own channel and what you control. So my recommendation is always both.
And I would add this is a great question, and like I think as the creator space gets defined, like definitely the kind of thing you want to talk and have a conversation about before ink is dry on a contract with a creator.
I think,
Um,
yeah, you got it, Laura.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, do you want to go to the final wrap-up question? Cool. What's the most important thing that folks should be taking away from today's discussion to know about YouTube? No big deal.
I'll go first. I think it's really hard to name one thing, but I think YouTube is an incredibly powerful platform, and it can be even more powerful for your campaigns, for your communication efforts, if it's fully integrated into your digital strategy, into how you're already communicating and wanting to see impact happen. So the integration of all of those things is key. You can have the most beautiful videos out there, and have the greatest content creators partner with you, but if you don't have the strategy behind why you're doing it, it's not going to be as successful.
I think on my end, YouTube is the place to reach audiences, and I mean that broadly. Like in a media environment that is so fractured, YouTube is like the one that stands out for Americans of every demographic, age group, are, at least at some point in their week, on YouTube as a website. And, if you can only pick one place to find and reach people, it probably should be YouTube.
Bring us home,
And
Steph.
it's hard to go last. I feel like every so much of what I would say has already been said. I think the last thing I would just say is like that reach exists for a reason, and I think it exists because of the creators on the platform. Another word we've heard a lot today is creator. Like the trust that they've built with these audiences, the choice that they present for people to get to, choose different viewpoints and hear from different things is so much of what builds that reach. And so you can't just like think of YouTube as another broadcast or the next broadcast. Like it is its own thing. And so how do you, keep that in mind as you are, harnessing the power of the platform?
Love that. Thanks, everyone. I mean, that's how can we do more than that? Wish we had more time. Really want to thank all the participants. Melanie from Spitfire Strategies, Steph O'Connell from Google, and Sebastian from Rising Tide Interactive. And of course, our co-host, Raz from Climate Advocacy Lab. Great discussion today, guys, and really appreciate everyone taking the time to join the call as well. We'll post a recording of this talk on, guess where, our YouTube channel. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and see you at our next call. Bye, guys.